Okay, so we're gonna call to order a meeting and start with calling for the Water and Sewer Commissioners. There's 2 requests for allocation changes.
All right, so Ted Dodd is not going to be heard tonight.
Okay, so we're just gonna table it, or,
Yeah, we have to table it because there's some other underlying
okay,
concerns.
okay, sounds good.
So Will Arnold, I thought Will was going to be here, but I'm gonna grab a pen.
We can also just table this for the moment, and if he comes in, switch back to it.
Yeah, because he knew it was going to start at 5:30. I mean, I can explain what's going on.
Sure.
You pretty much know what's going on anyway.
Yeah.
So Katie's restaurant closed May 1st.
Yeah.
And their allocation right now is, 6 units for the water and 5.5 units for sewer flat rate. It's based on flowage.
Right.
So the flowage for the restaurant was, water was 1,499 gallons per day. And then the wastewater was,
That's metered.
yes.
Okay.
And then the wastewater was 1,332.
Okay.
So from May until December, it's been vacant. So he was looking at, he's definitely looking to have a reduction in allocation. It was a dry goods mercantile store before, and that flowage for water was 117 gallons per day and 104 for the
There it is.
wastewater. Hi. So, that's what we're looking to get it back to, which is basically 1 unit
Right.
per. So it's 250 is
Minimum.
minimum.
Well, I certainly don't see any problem with the change in allocation. As far as abatement is concerned, I don't know whether, we just started, Will, so I don't know whether you want to add anything. I guess my feeling would be that it probably wasn't unreasonable for you to have kept it at that height for that period of time in the interest of making it rentable. So whether that sort of, how we balance that with abatement versus not. I don't
Well, if can I say something?
know. Of course, yep.
The issue for me was that until I rented it, I didn't know what the use would be.
Yeah.
So until I had an actual renter that was interested, I wasn't able to change the use. Otherwise, I would have had to do it like twice or,
Right. Right.
And that didn't make sense. So it just seems, I mean, the cost is outrageous. I don't know if you noticed what I
We
paid.
haven't yet reviewed the numbers.
You know, it's like $1,200 for a quarter versus, be like, 400 maybe, something like that. That's if it was at the mercantile or the dry goods rate.
Just at a single area.
Right.
Yeah. So, what I was hoping is that you could revert it to the dry good wastewater and water usage from the time that the restaurant closed to this, to now, basically.
Retroactively do that.
Yeah, and, then credit me or however it would work.
That's what it would probably
Yeah.
ideally be for us if we were to do that. I'm trying to think about precedent for this kind of thing. I mean, you know, we certainly do that when it's a catastrophic event, and not that there wasn't catastrophe involved in your situation, but I don't know, what, other opinions?
I'm just not so familiar with this situation.
Can I see the numbers? Thanks.
I mean, you know, from my reading of my last bill, I was using, my total consumption was 22, whatever that means. That's what it says on the bill. I don't know how many gallons that is, but that's the number. Versus the bill when the restaurant was actually going, it was 352.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's cubic meters, is that what that is?
Yeah, I think so,
Probably.
yeah.
Yeah, so you can see that the difference is, you know, dramatic.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any question about that, and the usage, and it would be standard for it to be rated in the situation that it's in as a or even as a simple commercial activity, but not a restaurant or otherwise high usage, for it to be a single ERU. I mean, that's the lowest we can do. Go ahead, Dan.
I was just wondering how often the water meters are read. Is it quarterly?
Yes,
Okay.
Before bills go out.
yeah.
And
It's-
you know, not all of the accounts in town are metered necessarily. Most of them are, but people have the option of either having it metered or base it on a minimum usage that's sort of standard. And then if they, you know, more often than not, people put a meter in when they either think their usage is going to be higher or lower than we think it is, but it's a minimum of a single residential unit, which is an ERU.
So, just so I understand, so what you're requesting for the abatement is not for the usage, because it's metered, right?
Well, yeah, the metered is almost a non-issue in a way.
Right.
I mean, I would,
It reduces it to below a single ERU, so.
Right, yeah.
Right.
what I would, because I would like to get the usage reduced to the level, since the restaurant moved as of like May 1st, and then the process of going through the change of use, which is what I had to do. Number one, it takes a long time. But number two, I can't really start the change of use until I actually know what the use is going to be.
Right.
So I'm sort of it's a catch-22 for me.
Yeah.
And so what I'm requesting is that I now have the change of use, or I believe I do, and I'm requesting that my water usage from May 1st be based on the new occupancy, which is a dry goods occupancy. And you have all the stuff from the engineer and the state on that.
Which is right here.
Yeah.
And he does already have the change of use.
Yeah, no, and I'm just, again, I'm trying to think of precedent and I can't think of one, and I'm just sort of reviewing in my head how we would normally do this, but, again, my only argument for, and again, this is just my argument in my mind for not reducing it, is that if you kept it in order to have that as a possible usage, but I understand your point. But I also understand, and I think we should recognize the fact that if you haven't used that water and sewer usage in that period of time, should that be your responsibility? Seemingly not.
Hope so.
So, yeah, no, it's just a question of, some people, again, would maintain that so that they didn't have to change it twice in the process.
Right.
And
if I had gotten another restaurant within like 30 days to go in,
exactly,
then I would have no issue with this.
Exactly, then you wouldn't be changing it, so. Water bond, I guess part of me would say maybe,
You want me to research it a little more?
Well, it would be a question of whether the difference in bond payment and usage, what that difference is, and whether we should accept responsibility for that and not for usage, or whether we should accept responsibility for the whole thing.
You know,
I'm not wed to either way, it's just, it's just a concept of precedent. I mean, are we willing to retroactively not charge bond usage if somebody wants to
I get
keep
it.
their account open kind of
Yes.
thing? And I, you know.
Does the bond change relative to the allocation?
It does. I mean, a percentage
So it's
of it is the bond, but it's only a
Right.
percent, you know, it's a certain amount of it. So, yeah, maybe we could put the numbers together for 2 weeks from now that, and certainly taking into account, Will, that we're making this decision now. I mean, I think we should go ahead and change the allocation
Yes.
now.
Yeah,
And then just let us do some homework on the other part.
Okay.
And figure out sort of what the, whether there's a reasonable way not to burden you with that whole thing and yet to not make it a precedent that we don't want.
You know, I was gonna suggest one thing, and it may not be something that would work, but it just seems like the town could possibly have a rule that when a property was unoccupied, that it could revert to a given amount, you know, rather than having to, you know, again, you know, this is a perfect example of why that might be a good idea, because all of a sudden, if you decide not to do this, all of a sudden I'm on the hook for, you know, it's like more than 2/4 of, you know, $1,200 per quarter. That's
Right.
$2,400.
And I guess
And I'm
that,
not even hardly using a drop of it.
right, but that's the issue, is that difference between the bond payment and the water, and the usage payment. And we should just look at what that is, and if that's reasonable, maybe that's a sort of happy medium, because the flip side of it is, and not that it necessarily costs you money, but to have it bond payment on 6 units, you know, I mean, the risk to you would have been that if you had come on May 15th and said, I want to revert back to a single ERU, and then on May 30th, somebody came along and said, I want it for the restaurant purposes. In the meantime, the new hotel on, you know, West Street or wherever had opened up and all our ERUs were consumed. You wouldn't have the option of having those 6 ERUs.
Oh, I see what you're
Right.
saying.
So, you know, I think you're right, as far as usage, you shouldn't be responsible for paying the usage you've had. But in order to basically hold that space, I mean, that's sort of the concept of the bond payment
Right.
for people who are not, and that's even been true historically, we're sort of past this point, but even people who didn't hook up to the system but wanted a reservation for the system in case they decided to,
Right.
they paid the bond portion of
Oh, I
it,
see.
but not the other part. So, as long as that's okay with you, I think we go ahead and change the allocation from here forward, and sort of look at the numbers and figure that out,
Yeah.
and then, and we would make that retroactive from today back, or however, you know,
But
whatever.
you see the other argument I was making, which is that, I mean, I see what you're saying, but the point about the difficulty to change the use before I have somebody that I know is gonna be in there, I can't really change the use without going through the
Yes.
process, spending the money, and then if I don't have a tenant yet, I'm sort of shooting from the hip about what the use will actually be.
Yeah, no, and, you know, of course, the reality in that, you know, situation that I pointed out of there being such a change in the water usage that it wouldn't be available to you at when you needed it, you know, possible, very unlikely. you know, we're not that close to capacity, but again, it's, you know, just in the interest of fairness and precedent setting,
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing we sort of have to think about. So we'll do some more homework on it, and, you know, we'll be as fair as, you know, we'll be as fair as we reasonably can, without setting a precedent that we don't want to set. So, but if somebody wants to make a motion to change the allocation as of now, then we'll go ahead with that. So change from 6 to 2
And then
for the water, and from, what was it,
5.5
5.5 to
1.
So, no, not from 6 to 2, sorry, from
6 to
6 to 1, both of those are
Right.
going to 1.
5.5 to 1. Okay, so I'll move to change the water allocation and sewer allocation for 118 Main Street
Yeah.
from 6 units to 1 for the water and 5.5 for the sewer to 1 ERU. Or
Yeah.
Second.
I second that.
So it's been moved and seconded to change the allocation at 118 Main Street from 6 ERUs of water and 5.5 ERUs of sewer to 1 for each. If there's no further discussion, then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we will review the other information and table it till 2 weeks from now. All right. So Ted, we're putting off till next meeting or until
When he's
some
ready,
point?
yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So if that's all we have for water and sewer, then we will call to order the select board meeting at 6:50 and 5:50, whatever it is. An hour here, an hour there.
2018.
So am I all set here?
You're all set,
You are,
yeah,
yeah.
and we'll keep you posted.
Okay.
Thanks. Any adjustments to the agenda?
Yeah, we're adding Ann,
We're gonna have a
conservation.
deeper discussion, yeah.
So we can put her behind restoration fund request.
Restoration fund, yeah.
Okay.
And then there's also been a request for public comment, so we'll go ahead and do that now unless anybody objects.
That's fine.
Is that all right?
You want to do minutes, yeah?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah, so,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll move to approve the minutes of December 19th.
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of December 19th as presented. Unless there's any further discussion, all in favor? Aye. All right, and then opportunity for public comment, so feel free.
Thank you.
If you could state your name for the camera, please.
Yes, sir. Howard Fairman, appearing as a private citizen. I am reporting a lethal road hazard that was installed sometime between Monday afternoon and Tuesday morning. I would have discussed it with Ms. Astley today, the first business day, but unfortunately she was occupied in meetings all day. So there's no disrespect to her in my addressing you first, but I believe that this is a sufficiently urgent situation that I should apprise you of it right away. It is on Westminster Road in the town right-of-way at Spring Hill Road. It is 7 stacked concrete blocks anchored by 2 angle irons threaded through them and driven into the ground. It is facing traffic, the long way on the blocks facing traffic and at the edge of the pavement. That is the description of it. It is there because I walk by there about every day. The mailboxes were knocked down recently, and this is supposedly protecting the reset mailboxes. However, the front seat occupants of many vehicles that hit it will be killed, and it is certainly invisible in darkness. So I'm notifying you of this. I assume that it is illegal and soon will be removed.
Where is it again?
Well,
Yeah.
Spring Hill, which is where, Meadowbrook, exactly, right across from the
It
Orchid.
is on Westminster Road in the
Yeah.
town right away, there's no doubt about this.
Okay, well, what we
Have to get
will do
Brian.
is exactly have the highway department look at it tomorrow
Yeah.
Sure.
and address it.
And I emphasize, I would have brought it up with you today, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, this couldn't be done, so.
Yeah, no, that's fine. No, and we appreciate the passing on of that
Yes.
information. I'm not sure that, as to the question of whether it's illegal or not, I'm not sure what our, because
I
people
guess-
certainly do all sorts of things for protecting their mailboxes, so, I'm not sure, but we'll have Brian look at it.
And if
And,
he feels that it's,
a danger,
yeah,
then that would be, yeah. So we'll have the
either
highway department assess
he
it.
may
and
just
go from
remove
there.
them,
He may, yeah,
depends on,
we'll see.
you'll have to look at it. He hasn't
Yes.
said anything.
I haven't noticed
I haven't
it.
noticed it either.
Trying to think whether I may not have driven by there in daylight today, so I may not have seen it, but,
Maybe on
To
your
your
way
point.
home.
well, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly, it may not be that visible, so, but we will address it and see whether there's an appropriate action for us to
Thank
take.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you,
All right.
thank you.
So select board items for discussion. So Ann, if you want to go ahead, Ann has already informed me, she called me on Monday, and there has been damage again to the beaver dam. And so the question is there something we should do that might encourage the beavers to manage that damage appropriately?
Right. This is pretty much the same thing that happened last summer and at that point, the pond on Sand Hill Road drained down to mud bottom, which was bad enough. But it was a time of year when all animals were moving, turtles could swim a different place, all of those things. In the middle of the winter, to lose that pond would be a much different situation, where the turtles are already in the mud, they're overwintering. If they haven't gone deep enough and the pond drains, they're gonna freeze to death. So, it's just not the optimum time for this to happen. So I did talk to Patty Smith at Beak, who's a naturalist, and she's written a book on her colony of beavers that she watches, and to Skip Lyle, who's our local beaver expert, who is actually developed and patented his beaver deceiver to help protect culverts from beavers. And in this little book, Eager, he is a prime character in one of the chapters. His work is reviewed and has worked with numerous towns. And he's really an incredible expert and a resource for this area. He's the one who did I sent you a little news article about Marlborough protecting their culverts. He was the one who did that work. He's worked in Grafton, he's worked in Andover, and he says more about this in the brochures that I left for you, which I don't have anymore. So what we're trying to do is try to figure out, he thought, even though it's the middle of the winter, I said, well, the beavers aren't gonna, replace this dam, it's the middle of the winter, they don't do these things in the middle of the winter. But he said if the weather were warm enough and the water did not freeze, there's a possibility that they might consider starting to build a dam again. And there's a way you can encourage this, which he knows about. It's very simple and not much to it. You just stick some posts very securely upright, and this would be downstream of where the dam used to be. The dam's totally gone at this point. It would be toward where below the dam, where the dam used to be, where the stream forks, where Socketsbrook forks. And having those vertical uprights are like a structure that if the beavers decide to do something, it encourages them to start putting something up against that. As well, we know from the culvert fences, because we have those uprights and that fencing, and they just immediately start packing that with sticks and whatever. So I don't know if this will work necessarily, but we're hoping that it might, And certainly, as we get towards spring, it would help encourage them to put something back up there. I would hope that they would do it before then. So he was thinking that the price might range for that work between $500 and $600. I'm hoping for $500, and I think he might agree to that. And I've sort of looked through the Conservation Commission budget, and I think we might be able to put $200 toward it, but we certainly do not have the full $500, because that's our whole budget, much of which we've already spent to help get the map for the tracking program finished. But we could perhaps, and the full Conservation Commission has not considered that yet, but I'm personally wondering if the town couldn't come up with $300 somewhere to get this project started and to hopefully get a beaver dam back in place and a pond, and keep the pond. And so that's the issue at the moment. The dam went out between December 21 and December 22. There was high water at that time. There was rain and snow melt on Friday into Saturday morning, and by Saturday afternoon the dam it was not there. The beavers have put their food sticks north of the stream. They have 2 large piles of food sticks in Sockett's Brook. They were underwater before, now they're exposed, which reduces their nutritional value, or their value as food, if that goes on too long. But the other thing that's really interesting, the food piles didn't move at all. They really put those food piles in there the right way, and they just stayed right there. So those are still there, but they need to be recovered with the water, if possible. They'll still, if they don't have those, they will be venturing out on ice to harvest, and then they're going to be very vulnerable to predation. That puts them at great risk. So anyway, that is the update and the request.
I'm curious, do you think the dam was sabotaged, or do you think it just washed out?
I cannot know. Okay. There were no game cameras at the time, and by the time I got out, I was busy baking Christmas cookies. But by the time I got out there, so I didn't go out during the rainstorm at all. But the next day, the whole dam was just gone. It was really pretty remarkable. The beavers at one point had put 2 downstream dams on the 2 forks, and this little dam on this one fork had been washed away long ago, and they didn't rebuild it. But the dam they had built on the broader section, half of that stayed in place. You know, it didn't all go. So it was definitely...
It was a pretty remarkable amount of water coming.
It was, and that's why I was amazed that the food sticks didn't go anywhere, like down to the bridge, but they didn't. So we simply don't know. I can't really give an opinion on that.
But it was definitely during that
Yes.
high water, and there was
Yeah.
an impressive amount of water, so I think it's,
Yeah, certain
Who knows?
structures
Who knows, but it
remained,
would be
that
hard,
particular
yeah.
dam, didn't, so.
I'm just going to, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, question or comment from the floor?
certainly.
First, I walk by there nearly every day. The water was extremely high,
Yeah.
and then it wasn't. So I would be inclined toward a natural event as opposed to someone wading into the water and pulling the dam apart. I am acquainted with Ms. Smith and Mr. Lyle, both of whom are excellent at what they do. But what they do is advance their personal agendas concerning beavers. And therefore, I ask the question whether you have consulted a wildlife biologist employed by Vermont Fish and Wildlife who has particular expertise in beaver management.
We certainly have in the past. I don't know whether you have in this situation.
Corey Cheever was the beaver specialist for Fish and Wildlife. He is the one who assisted us in building the beaver exclusion fences. Corey and Tom Prunier, who lives in Westminster but volunteers with us often, built those. And Mary Quinn and her crew have been maintaining them for some time. And secondly, the other person that we spoke to was Tyler Brown, who's the new beaver specialist at Fish and Wildlife. And he said he would be available to help us if, you know, an occasion arose. All of them understand, as well as the game warden understands, that this is an area where we are protecting beaver and hoping that they will be there and build dams, both for recharge, because the ponds recharge our aquifer for the town well, and the ponds are really nice to have in terms of wildlife. And basically, Mary Quinn and her crew for 6 years assured that this may just be the changing climate and the change in, you know, how much rain comes down, but for 6 years she made sure that the road was never flooded. It flooded once last summer, I think it was, and it was inundated. And then the water went back down and the road was regraded, and that was the extent of the damage. And other parts of the town had damage that added up altogether was close to $30,000 worth of damage, especially high-low biddy. So we seem to be able to get to a balance between the wetland and the beavers. And Mary's becoming a beaver expert. I'm not a beaver expert, but I'm learning more and more. But we have been in touch with Vermont Fish and Wildlife.
Have you received advice from them?
Advice?
Yes.
Yes, to build the beaver exclusion fences and to try to figure out a balance, you know, that will allow the beavers to be there.
But in this particular instance, have they advised you or not?
No.
So, yeah, my only question, and I understand the question of whether there's a personal agenda involved, and that would be, you know, that would be hard to adequately analyze, just because if it's your business and it's what
No,
how
this
you
is
make your
business.
money,
This is what he does for a living.
Right, no,
So
I know.
His end is to make some money. And
Yes, no, but I think the question that's an appropriate question is this a necessary expenditure, and my only question about it is, if this was a natural event, and I totally understand the implications of the downside of this, but if this was a natural event, should we be monkeying with it, or should we just leave it alone? And I guess that would be maybe the question of where
that sort of where-
somebody from the state
Yes,
might
you-
offer
Yeah, and I also
advice.
have to say Skip Lyle is not necessarily pushing this particular expenditure. It's more my agenda, wanting to do something to stop the draining of the pond in the middle of the winter. And his suggestion, if that was my goal, that this might be the right approach.
This would be a possibility.
What I think he was more interested in doing, looking over the situation, was putting in his more advanced beaver deceiver, which is not only a culvert fence, but a pipe out through the fence to another thing,
Yeah.
which is hidden under the water, and the beavers can't
So
figure
it
out
doesn't get clogged.
yeah.
Right.
And then if he would have to speak to you more about these, and that would be a big expense, but what it would mean would be that the Conservation Commission and the Wetland Committee would no longer
have to maintain.
be, you know, clearing those fences during the summer and the fall.
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman, you have correctly inferred my intent.
okay, good. Yeah, I mean, I think that's not an unreasonable action to take, to get an opinion as to whether we should involve ourselves in it, or if it was a natural event, should we stay out of it? Again, I recognize the implications of staying out of it, and what's your sense of what's happening to the water level around Sand Hill? Has it dropped precipitously, or?
Yes, it went down by 20 inches in a week, and it was going the same, as if it rains, after the next rainfall, it was up 3 inches. So I have not been out there today to check what it is at the moment, but we put the whole place to bed. There was 50 inches of clearance at the bridge, and after this happened, it was 71 inches of clearance at the bridge. But then after a rain, it went back up to, I think, to 67 inches of clearance. So about 4 inches maybe added, and then What happens is the pond water just runs right next to the road, straight to the bridge.
Right.
And it's just, it's just sort of sad.
I wondered, in the interest, the kind of preservation and avoiding some of this, whether it was sabotage or natural, if putting posts in creates more a structure to build a stronger dam so that we're avoiding these issues, you know what I mean?
One would hope.
I guess that's what I'm wondering, and it would be interesting to see if there's any data on that. But if you can put some posts in, so really holds the dam together, makes it even more difficult. If it is one person trying to pull this apart, then we may not run into these issues as often. So it may be a long-term preventative plan. That's my thought.
I can certainly, ask that question. I think that's a good point.
I also can't help but wonder if our response should be dependent on whether it was natural or,
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
I agree.
That's sort of where I am at the moment, because it's
Yeah.
just happening.
yeah.
Well, no, and the unfortunate downside of not doing something is the possible risk to the wildlife that's in the mud. How do we balance that with if it's a
Yeah.
naturally
And
occurring
then-
event?
And you do have the wood turtles using the, bank overhangs. In other words, they are along the stream bank
Right.
and under the
Yeah.
overhangs.
Yeah,
So now the water's, down for them too.
right.
I'm not quite sure how that affects them, or if it does. I'd have to talk to Jim
Whether
Andrews.
they can survive if it freezes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
If private citizens were to raise the money for this, would we approve it? I mean, would we even need to approve it happening?
It's on town.
It's
land.
town land,
Yeah,
so
so-
we would probably defer to the recommendation of the Conservation Commission. But I think it wouldn't be an unreasonable thing to check in with ANR or Fish and Wildlife and see what their opinion is as to whether we should insert ourselves in it or not. And I don't know how you feel about that, Ann.
I can certainly ask him, Tyler Brown's been, if he's there. Someone suggested that he might be seasonal, that they might have their beaver. But on the other hand, this is beaver trapping season, so he may be year round, so.
Yeah.
But that's not a problem.
Yeah.
He's been
and
very responsive before.
Karen, what's your feeling about the money and if we would approve? I mean, we it's not a huge amount of money, so I'm not too concerned about saying, I mean, I guess my feeling would be if the state were to say, yeah, you guys should definitely act on this, then I would say we're likely to fund that at our next meeting. If the state says, you probably ought to leave it alone, then I think we probably ought to leave it alone. So I guess I would defer to, and I understand that you've already gotten expert opinion about it, but it's not state expert opinion, so that's a slightly different situation.
I was the one who had the opinion.
Yeah.
And Skip Lyle said, if this is what you're trying
Something
to
you want
achieve, he was very, I suggested a beaver dam analog, which is where people actually build a dam.
Right.
And he thought the beavers would do a better job, and just give him a hint.
I would think they would.
Yeah.
That's what they do. The only other question I have is, what if the state doesn't want to throw in on this? What if they say, like, we don't have an opinion on this?
They're pretty likely to have, I don't know. Then I think that would be, I guess it's also, I mean, unfortunately, we can't predict the weather, so we don't know what the level of urgency is. If we're gonna suddenly drop into a deep freeze next week, but chances are they're not gonna be able to rebuild before next week anyway, I wouldn't think. I mean, I don't know how fast that process would be, but
They're pretty good once they get started.
I'm sure.
The question is whether they get started.
yeah.
They may
Yeah.
just, I don't know what they might decide to do, but it might be something different. We can't hire them.
Much as you might like to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Tyler Brown definitely was not perturbed by the pond draining last summer.
Right.
Because he could not get over the idea that that was natural for that pond, which we know it's not, because he didn't know the history and we were not gonna go back through all that.
Yeah.
But, so if we want the pond, what I would be interested in knowing from him would be whether or not he thinks in the middle of the winter, if we give them a hint, the beavers might do something.
Whether it's worth, right, basically.
Yeah.
Whether, so and that's a good question, and as far as spending town money is concerned, that's a viable question to ask somebody that has that level of expertise. So I guess what I would ask of you, Ann, maybe, is that you research that and try and limit your personal influence on the opinion aspect of it. Not, I respect it and appreciate your opinion.
People always tell me what they think. Believe me, I don't intimidate anyone.
But if you could try and sort of feel him out without
Without
saying,
opinion.
this is what we think we should do, what do you think? But saying, this is the situation, should we take action or not, then, and I think
I agree with you.
I think we then go from there.
Yeah.
So, but again, my feeling would be if Tyler says, yes, you should do this, and yes, it's urgent, then
we can-
I think coming up with some funds
He's a
for it is
beaver-
probably.
I will ask Jim Andrews, the herpetologist, how urgent he thinks it is.
That would be also a useful
Yeah.
piece of input, I would think, yeah.
Because as far as the beavers are concerned, he may not, he'll just say they'll go off and cut some food sticks someplace else, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's really, it's a question of whether we're damaging the other
Right.
wild. Yeah, no, I'm not, I don't
Yeah.
know the reality, but I'm guessing we don't have to worry too much about the beavers themselves. It's whether we're worried about others.
Yeah, exactly, because they are prime creators of really important habitat.
Yeah. So, okay, does that sound
Now,
fair?
when do you meet next? Because this is an ongoing draining, I'm not quite sure. The one smaller dam is still somewhat there.
We meet
trying
again in 2 weeks. But again, if there, what I'm saying is if there's urgency, you should assume that we will approve funding for it 2 weeks from now. So I would say if the state recommendation is, yes, you should do something, I would say go ahead and do it, and 2 weeks from now, we will figure out how to fund it. Does that sound fair?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if they say, don't meddle with it, then we don't.
Okay.
Or, well, then I guess that would be up to you. Well, again, sort of defer to the, if you were to want to gather volunteers to go and patch up the dam, I'm not sure we'd say no to that, but I.
There is no dam
but I
to
don't.
patch up.
Well, there you go. So that's probably not an issue.
Plus, you don't want to encourage beavers to work off a structure an amateur has put in place.
Right. No, and actually I was interested after we talked the other day, because I know I think it was you or maybe it was Mary who had said that the current beavers are very capable dam builders, so I was
Yeah, that was
sort of
me.
surprised that it had let go. But
Yeah.
again, that was a lot of water, and it was odd circumstances where it was, because the ground was all frozen, that there was just nowhere for it to go.
It was
and
January thaw.
it was
and,
an odd situation,
Yeah.
definitely.
Well, thanks for listening. on
Thank
short
you
notice.
for keeping track of them.
Okay.
All right. Restoration fund request. This is town hall?
That's for me.
Jonathan,
Okay, what do you got?
town clerk.
As you know, the town clerk is responsible for maintaining town records.
Yes.
And whenever a document is filed for recording, there's a $10 a page fee that's charged. And of that $10 goes into something called the Restoration Fund.
Yeah.
And is used to maintain the vault and preserve records. And we have discussed previously that we're digitizing the land records. I want to move on and fix our maps and surveys, which are just a complete mess. They're not stored well, they won't last. The current balance of the restoration fund is $82,000.
And that, do we hold that fund, or does because the state takes some of it, don't they?
No, it's
No, it's just in-house?
Yes.
It's just socked away.
Okay.
And what I would like to do is explore digitizing our surveys and ordering a new plat cabinet so that they can be kept for the long term. I don't know if you've been in the vault. I've asked Eileen Shute, who is a lister and has some free time, whether she would be willing to take charge of that project. She's presented me with some proposals. We need to figure out exactly what we're going to do. But what I would propose is to pay her normal hourly rate, $15 an hour.
Her lister's rate.
Her lister's rate, to physically scan the documents. And we haven't decided on what scanner we're gonna use. We can't use ours because it's not big enough.
Yeah.
And so she spent some time and going around looking at, she went to Westminster to look at theirs, Dummerston, a town in New Hampshire. So she had a little bit of travel and some hours to putting together this proposal. I'd like to pay her for that, and then move forward with, once we get the best estimate of moving forward with that project.
So you don't have a total budget?
I do not.
At this point? Yeah.
But Eileen has put in some time and she deserves to be compensated for that.
Yeah.
And I'd like to pay it out of the restoration fund, which has a current balance of $82,000.
And that requires our approval to use funds from the restoration fund?
We weren't sure, but we thought that the safer bet
Wouldn't be a bad
would
Bring
be,
it to you.
before we spend any money, let's,
I mean, that restoration fund, is that, just because I don't know, is that statutory that we,
Yes.
that we have that?
Yes.
So, has anybody looked at the statutory aspect of it to see what our responsibility is for who doles it out? Not yet.
I have not seen anything in the statute that says how it should be spent.
It might,
That being said, in most towns, the town clerk is elected. And elected officials presumably have
Charge.
no,
the
that's a good point.
responsibility to safeguard those monies.
It might-
Because I'm appointed,
Right.
I thought it would be
Potentially
better
a different situation.
to talk
Yeah.
over with you. And, you know, I know at least a couple of you have mentioned digitizing records for
Yeah.
the future.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, no, certainly my opinion is that moving forward with this is a good idea. Having a budget proposal would be a good thing. I would also recommend that either you or you speak to maybe VLCT about how monies from that fund should be distributed. They may have a recommendation, they may not. If they did, that would be a simple way to get some information about it, but otherwise, I mean, I think you're right, just in the interest of basically transparency, before you go spending money, it probably makes sense. But if there's a either statutory or, you know, sort of established policy, or maybe we come up with a policy for how that works. So,
Not another one.
just one more policy. Well, you know, you could work together on that. It doesn't have to be a huge policy, but it might just be worth having some guidelines as to, so that,
I think that's a good idea.
you know, somebody.
And I'm happy to draft something for next meeting. In the meantime, between, Eileen has worked the equivalent of $352.41, and I would like to see her get paid for that. And this project is going to be ongoing, so if there was a motion, I might suggest that we authorize up to $2,000 to be paid on preliminary research and planning to digitize and store maps and surveys.
I think that sounds like a good idea.
Out of the restoration fund, of course.
As long as we're not paying out money that doesn't benefit us directly in the process of doing that. I mean,
Right.
you know, I may be stating the obvious, but, you know, we don't want to pay a bunch of research to be done and then it doesn't
We're definitely
sort
moving
of
forward
come
with
to
this project.
fruition for us, so, yeah. That sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, if we want a motion to approve up to $2,000 of expenditure from the restoration fund until we have clarification as to how funds from the restoration fund should be spent, then that makes sense.
So moved.
Yeah, seconded.
All right. Moved and seconded to approve up to $2,000 expenditure from the restoration fund to research and start the project of improved restoration of our, or preservation of our files. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Just out of curiosity, would architects have the scanner necessary? Some architects?
They might, and the company that does our engineering,
Right.
they have a big plate scanner.
The other, I
I just-
think, Perfect Image, just across, like Perkins, I think they have one too, the print, they do
Oh.
print, they used to do the town report for us, I'm not sure whether they are. Is
Oh,
it Perfect
over-
Image or no, they,
In Chesterfield?
in
Yeah.
Chesterfield, what is
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
that's
Right by
not
Pete's
Perfect
Tires
Image,
or-
that's,
Prospect
Prospect,
yeah, there you go.
yeah, Prospect, right.
Or Perfect Image might also, I mean, they're, they're all in that business, but possibilities.
Another possibility is Lotus Graphics.
Lotus,
One.
yeah.
Oh,
We
that's
have an
right.
estimate,
That's right.
we have an estimate from Lotus Graphics, and it's pretty high. It's higher
The
than
other
it's-
thing too is Jonathan doesn't want to just leave the plans.
No,
He wants somebody to be able to.
So-
go
scan
and
it.
do it, and,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
no,
What I
so
want- what I
somebody
want
would
is-
have to be willing
Yeah, those
to
Right.
do
those are
that.
town documents, I think we need to
Yeah.
maintain custody of them. And so I wanted Eileen to go and, take them and scan them and
Be present for the
and
process.
be present for the whole
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
just so we
Yeah.
make, I don't think you can put, original surveys in FedEx and ship them off to someplace.
We probably don't want. And I know, and I think you've spoken with these people, but there are state people who specialize in this.
Every month, the state archives has a tour for town clerks.
So-
And I've been up there.
They might just have a recommendation for somebody local who's good at that kind of thing, or maybe not, I don't know. There's also the mapping people up in Chester, whose name's DeVorn, I can't remember, but they do a lot of that kind of thing.
We've contacted, I think, at least five
Okay.
different places already.
Sounds good,
We're hoping to find a free scanner and just pay for labor.
yeah.
And then once we have the images, then they'll be linked into the land records, so that when you search using our land record module, you'll be able to find the survey and look at it online and print it, if you need to, as opposed to grubbing through my maps with your grubby paws.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, another possibility is renting a large format scanner, bringing it here, using it, and then sending it back.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea too.
I wonder, are actually.
All
the-
service.
Yeah, exactly, the people who we rent our Xerox from.
Howard, that's a great idea.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, 2018 equalization study results. So this is the common level of appraisal which is issued by the state, right? That's what we're talking about.
Yep.
To, for all practical purposes, assess how our assessments compare to statewide levels of assessment, and as long as you fall within the boundaries, then it's just information to be held. Otherwise, it can trigger a need for a new reappraisal. But we don't have that issue. Our common level of appraisal is at 99.7%.
Which is very good.
Which is very good. 100% means you are at or just above where you should be, and so we're just
Yeah.
below that, which is right where we want to be.
Yeah, Jody said it was,
That's about as good as we could probably be.
yeah.
Yeah. And if it drops below 80%, which is what happened previously to trigger the last reappraisal we did, then that's a statutory requirement, but otherwise, looks good.
Yeah.
All right. Draft budget review.
There's a lot of stuff in here.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my feeling in looking through this previously was unless there are specific things that you want to point out, maybe we just spend a little more time sort of pouring over this and keep revisiting it. But
Yeah.
do you have specifics, Karen, that are either of concern or not?
This top sheet, which is Town of Putney calculations for FY '20. It looks like this.
Yeah.
So based on all the numbers, the tax rate will be, the difference is 0.0089. So, let me see if I can go through this. So the total budget for general fund is $1,469,832. Less the capital, less the social services, and I'll show you that, that's on another sheet. Then the highway budget, $1,465,436, less capital, less the projects, which is the paving grant at 200,000. And then the new, oh no,
Culverts.
yeah, it's the Holland, not the Holland Hill, the Fred Houghton,
Mhm.
at 175,000. So that gives you a net budget of 1,935,945.
Sorry, Karen, you said that paving was 200 and that Houghton Brook was 170.
75?
No, maybe it's supposed to be 275. Yeah, 275, sorry. It's been a
For
long.
Houghton Brook?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So the general fund and the highway articles are just below that, so that's what we're gonna write in the articles.
Mhm.
The grand list figure, that's what it was based off of. Let me see. So the difference is 0.89 or 0.0089 is what taxes are going to
Oh, I
go
see.
up
Okay.
by. But that's being conservative because we don't know how the grand list is going to change
Right. And we,
with new construction. And we know there's some things out there, like,
and we don't know what the rate will be,
right,
so, yeah. So this is sort of a,
this is a.
should be an approximate
Right.
estimate.
The other thing too, this could go down
Yeah,
depending on the grand list. Now, we have taken into consideration Great River Hydro
Mhm.
that we lost about, I think it was 9,100 through taxes because of their value.
Mhm.
So it's not bad. It was 2 cents. We got it down to this number. Because 2 cents would have been,
A bigger change.
yeah,
Not an unheard of change by any stretch,
Right.
but
right.
less is better.
So just to point out too, in the budget, the things that increased are insurances. So medical, dental, VLCT, passive,
Mhm.
most of the increases are with insurances.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know how we're gonna address that in the future, because they're gonna continue to go up.
Yeah, I mean, how we've addressed it historically is that we essentially go out to bid periodically.
And I think we need to do that. We've made changes with medical, So the highway department, we added a couple, so a 2-person policy, plus a single policy. These were guys that were already working, but they didn't have it because
Right.
they were on their parents or,
Yeah,
you know, their spouses. The library increased from a single to a
Right.
double.
yeah,
And the same thing happened here. I mean, we added a double, we matched a single, because
Yeah.
Deb had a single, and then my family went down to a double.
yeah.
So, and even with the changes, it still rose.
That,
It's insane. Well,
it's very unusual that that doesn't happen every year.
Yeah.
I mean, there have been times when our insurance costs have gone down. It's really unusual. I mean,
Yeah.
I would say at least 7, if not a 9 out of 10 years, it goes up, and there's just nothing we can do about it.
Yeah.
But
But I think shopping around will be, we should do that.
Yeah, and
every few
we changed, we had a private carrier and then went back to passive 3 years ago, probably. And it was a little bit more money, but the services and the coverage were seemingly worth justifying that.
Right.
And so, we want to look carefully. I mean, the nice thing about passive is that they're so knowledgeable about insurance in Vermont and what
Right.
other municipalities are doing, and they also offer us a whole lot of sort of extra credit benefits that others don't.
Yeah.
So, it's, in order to consider going away from them, it has to be a pretty compelling argument. But we have done it before, so,
Yeah.
but I think, this year, certainly we're not gonna rush into that.
No.
And so if that's something you wanna take on over the next year, I think that's fine.
Yeah, it's worth looking into.
Yeah,
We start with the medical and dental and,
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, they're just such complex equations too, that it's frustrating because you start to try and compare them and
yeah,
where do you gain and where do you lose? And,
yeah. It's not really apples to apples.
It's really hard to make it even
Right.
close, Fruit to fruit is a good start,
Yeah.
You go from there.
So in this packet, you have your social service agency contributions.
This is based on the number
Yeah.
based on the number you came up with.
Find it, Steve?
Oh, yes.
So the question remains, as you can see, Putney Community Center and Putney Cares are separate.
Putney Cares and Putney Family Services.
Family Services,
Right.
sorry.
Yeah. Putney Food Shelf.
So, if you were gonna allocate evenly, so 50,
You'd take those 4 and divide it by 3, but,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I think we were pretty clear that we would be funding them to the level that we have been funding them. So I don't think we can really do that in this year. So I think we just list them as 2 and how we, however you want to do that for budgeting purposes is fine, but I do think it's probably, again, it's surprising how quickly the memory will disappear, so we just want to be very clear, but, sort of by the time we're putting together next year's budget, we should probably have a policy statement or whatever it would be that clarifies why we're doing that or not doing it going forward.
yeah, because, well, the thing is, by next year, when we write this check, one of those entities may not exist.
Well, the two that have merged into one will probably exist, but they'll exist as one.
Right.
So,
Can we write a check to a different entity than what the town approved?
no, it would have to be listed as,
Right.
as the
Putney
current,
Community
as the,
Cares
exactly,
twice.
yeah.
Was there a way of creating another category?
Yeah, this
That-
is
That
what
was
we,
one idea, I know that.
Exactly, yeah. No, and we don't,
we were gonna look into, you were gonna look into how other towns did this, right?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if there's
I don't
something
have
that, a distinction.
No other towns
with
have,
Community
or you
cares
just
or
haven't
public
had time
family
yet.
I
services.
haven't looked
Where you
into
can
it.
separate it out.
Well, understandable.
Yeah. Sorry.
yeah, no, and I think I think we all, again, we all have the knowledge of what we agreed to when we spoke with them, et cetera. So I don't feel like there's any issue with that as far as giving them the two allotments.
Yeah.
It's a question really for you as the finance director
Yeah.
as to how we can do that going forward if we're going to.
Right.
And/or what we're gonna do if we don't do it that way, so what are the options? So, but, I think probably for this year's budgeting purposes.
Yeah.
And so that it's not holding you up over the next 30 days.
Right.
Why don't we have two categories of Putney Community Cares and do it that way? And that in itself will probably generate some discussion at town meeting,
Right.
and then we go from there.
Okay.
But by this time next year, we should have a better answer, definitely.
Yeah, we might have answers by then
Yeah.
if we get questioned. Okay.
Otherwise, not that different from last year's.
No.
You could probably, I think we already talked about this, you could just drop Brattleboro area, drop-in center and Morningside Shelter and just make it into Grand Works Collaborative,
Yeah.
just as far as paperwork is concerned, so,
And any questions?
yeah, simplify.
Yeah. I shall do that.
All right. Karen, I mean, it's up to you. I don't want to force you to go through all this stuff.
Well, I'm just gonna give you some highlights, so when you guys,
Are looking,
you
yeah.
can look
I just don't
and
want to.
see how it all relates.
I'd rather you go home
I
when you need to
know,
go
too.
home.
Come on, Sharon.
But I think we can do this another.
Sharon is
This is
Karen.
gonna be here.
It's,
And you're sharing with me, yeah.
Yeah.
You guys don't wanna share something?
No, I really don't.
close the room.
No.
Well, I thought I was the only one with it, but Kim had it, Jordy had it.
Oh, I think there's plenty of it going
So,
around,
yeah,
but
like-
that doesn't mean we
Yeah,
all
but you're
want
also
it.
not feeling good and it's.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it,
I'd
I'm not
rather
saying
see-
it as, no, exactly.
No, I appreciate.
I don't want you to stretch yourself.
I'm
You
already
need your
saying
strength anyway, so.
The capital loan notes and payments. So this has been updated. So any loan payment we have is on this sheet. And that also matches something somewhere
That's good.
in one of these reports, but you'll see it, okay? But it's more information for you to be able to relate the reports to. And that's something else too, John Mudgett, the auditor,
Yeah.
pointed out, and this is very important because this is what he asked for in order to finish his audit.
He asked for it to be done this way?
No, but he needs to know what we have out there.
Yes, yeah.
So it's critical that this be updated.
Is kept
and
up,
and kept up.
Yeah.
But we do have a program called Fixed Assets, but we're just getting into that right now.
Yeah, I have always found, and this is good, I've always found we've usually had a chart that shows the payments going out
Yep,
for a certain period of time.
and I have that one.
That's useful just because it
Right.
sort of puts it in a graphic form that
Yep,
is not too hard, but again, whatever's most useful for you is important.
I have the other one too, so.
Okay. We can see that based on the maturity date for these also, so, I mean, it's sort of the same thing, but some of them don't have a constant payment amount, but usually they have been.
Well, that's probably because of interest and
Exactly.
principal.
Yeah.
I want to find, I don't know if I can do it quickly enough.
Are they still, they're still.
Highway department. All right, so on page 3,
Of highway?
yeah. So just be careful because they're kind of, you gotta look.
Highway, yeah. Yeah, page 3. Excuse me.
So 3/4 of the page down, capital and debt service. Says direct, let's see, principal payment right there, $147,900. And it matches your capital loan. So right here, Steve.
Yep.
You got it? All right. You seen it?
That matches
Josh?
that 147.9.
Yeah, and that's across the board, so it's set up by department.
Yeah,
So you have general fund, you have your highway department, and then you have water sewer.
yeah.
And, but you'll see that in your capital and debt service. And that tells us that we have everything in the budget that we're paying out in 2020.
Direct capital expenditure, what was that guy? Minus 50 minus 50 budget. Directly above.
That was probably the mower,
Okay.
over the rail mower.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've talked about this in the past, and I'm sure you're not unaware, but just because we're looking at a display of it right now, our payment, 18, 19, FY 20, our expenditures on principal payment were steady in 18 and 19,
Yep,
and then dropped by 20,000.
yep,
Looking like they're gonna drop by 20,000 for 20. So historically, we've tried to keep that as even as we can. Not that we wanna go out and spend an extra $20,000 just for the purpose of spending $20,000, but when we're doing that other one that takes us out over time,
yep,
and I'm sure you're already seeing it this way, but,
right.
you know, the less cyclical that is, the better,
Right.
the better for us.
And then I'll have that report next time.
Okay,
And we had 3 loans paid off.
right, which is great. Yeah,
That's
no,
great,
and again,
yes.
I'm not suggesting
Yeah.
we try and figure out where to spend more money, but if
Right.
we, you know,
Keep it
just in the interest
level.
of keeping it as
Right.
level as we
Yeah.
can, that makes your job
Yeah.
easier in the
Yeah.
long run, so.
Another thing too, what we didn't do with this, this report, usually you guys see like a percentage, you know,
Yeah.
whether it's a negative or
Percent change,
positive.
yeah,
It's a dollar amount.
yeah, that's fine. I mean, the percentage is a nice column to have in there as well, but,
I can put both in there,
yeah.
but you know, when you say 3%, it's like, all right, and you sit there and you gotta look at the numbers and it's like, so,
Yeah, what I find about that percent column is it's an easy reference point for a significant change.
right.
You know,
You're scanning
you
through.
can look at this and do the same thing just by adding up the numbers, but,
Yeah.
you know, if you're going down the column and, you know, it's 0.0003%, you know, and then there's one that's 18%, you go, wait a minute, why is that? And then it just draws your.
I can add that in there if it helps.
I find it helpful. but-
Okay.
Yeah, I do too. Is this the same one that you emailed us?
I didn't email you that
Not
one.
this one, so it's this other one?
I didn't email you any of the budget.
Yeah,
I
you
Yeah,
thought you
There was
did.
something, yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, you did.
I looked at it.
yeah.
You
For
didn't,
2020?
but maybe she.
Yeah, for 2020.
I couldn't have.
There was a budget and there was a budget comparison, but they were
Yeah.
different, remember we talked about, they were different than what you did here.
Yeah, that's not what I sent. This is
Okay.
not what I sent you.
Yeah, 'cause it does look different. There was just something in there. I was
Sick, but not that sick.
Yeah, no, it's like,
Yes, it is, Karen.
no,
but
it's not. and
It's
I will
time for you to
argue
go
with
home
you.
now.
No, this is the proposed
Gotcha, okay.
2020.
Okay, well, let's,
So I just.
I think we've heard what we need to for tonight.
I
And
think
let's,
you guys can get your
Yeah,
heads around it.
let's talk
now.
about it more.
Yeah.
oh, just crazy. Only gonna get better.
okay. So draft audit review, I mean, I would say the same thing, Karen. If there's any highlights you want to point out, I mean, it looked like his, you know, I mean, the vast majority of the draft audit is boilerplate and/or just the numbers we have and know we have. His recommendations and findings are minimal.
Yeah.
And, you know, you've obviously been talking to him about that, so.
He just sent me today, journal entries that need to be made, so,
To tidy things up a little bit.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I gotta work on that, and then, he will come and speak to the board.
yes,
All we have to do is request
yeah,
that to happen.
yeah,
So I wanna get the changes,
yeah,
and then there's like this other piece that I have to fill in, and then you'll have to sign off on it when you're comfortable with it.
yeah,
But basically, so the highway department has a reserve,
yeah,
and then we were in the red for general fund, but it was because of deferred taxes
Right.
that weren't collected. And it could be also from accounts payable, so
Mhm.
bills got paid in 2019
previous to, yeah,
instead of, they should have been paid in 2018,
right,
so, and it happens,
yeah.
but,
No, and it doesn't look to me like they're devastating numbers, so it's,
it's not, and the reality is that,
it all comes out in the wash.
it'll come out next year.
Right.
But you have to, you know, the tax sale policy,
Has to be looked at.
we
Yeah,
have to follow the
Yeah.
policies.
Yeah,
And that protects us from,
getting where we are,
Mhm.
yes, definitely.
so,
Yeah. All right, well, yeah, once that's closer to completed, we'll revisit it
that might be done like
by the next meeting.
by the 19th. Is it the 19th one? 16th,
Yeah, sounds good.
is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. And if we have to have a meeting on the 23rd, we can do that. And then we're scheduled to have a meeting on the
On the
30th.
30th, yeah,
So,
that'll be up to you whether you think we need it or not,
Yeah.
basically.
Mhm.
So,
Understandable, you do.
yeah.
yeah, either way, whatever, you know, even if it's just a short thing where we review a few things that you
Right.
feel like we haven't
Yeah.
covered.
And
But,
we can just do like all budget talks.
right. Boy,
We don't have to have
that
anything
sounds like a
else.
fun meeting.
Well, it sounds like we're fun to have an extra meeting for.
Yeah. All right, so financials, we've just been through, right?
Yeah, I just gave you what's.
All of this stuff,
Yeah,
yeah, for
current
social
year.
service and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. So, do you have a report for us at all, or not?
No,
Okay, good. So, right on to warrants then?
All right. Move to approve and execute the warrants as presented upon review.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve and execute the warrants as presented, as reviewed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So payroll warrant dated December 28th in the amount of $9,889.88. I think that's all on call as well as regular.
Library.
Payroll warrant dated January 4th, 2019 in the amount of $8,133.84. I think that's what that says. Accounts payable dated December 24th through January 4th, 2019 in the amount of $19,381.96.
Wow.
That's, I know,
Didn't
right?
buy too many presents.
I know, I'm like, wait a minute, where's the rest of it?
Where's the extra digit?
Right, there's something wrong with that. That's a good way to start the new year.
Yeah.
I like that.
Don't get used to it.
There's not much on there.
Was it the Life Estate one? Is that a?
That was some sort of refund, an overpayment.
Tax payment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was a little messed up. It's a life estate. It's in there with 3 different people. One of the people passed away. So the check had the person's name on it. The bank wouldn't cash it.
No, it's-
Not even with a death certificate.
Really?
So, what? So we had to reissue. We voted for the first check and reissued it. But we go by what's in the system,
Right.
because that's what the
What you go by.
PTTR go, you know, we go by the PTTR. So.
Any other business that you have?
Yeah.
Getting out of here, that's your other business. And we don't need an executive session, I don't.
Not
think.
tonight.
Okay. Next meeting date is January 16th. And other than that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good.